Headline edition, July 8, 1947. The Army Air Forces has announced that a flying disc has been found and is now in the possession of the Army.
However, there have been a certain percentage of this volume of reports that have been made by credible observers of relatively incredible things.
There is very compelling evidence that we may not be alone, whatever that means.
There's a whole fleet of them. Look on the ASA. Look at that thing, dude.
American public and global public finally understands UFOs are real.
Non-human, exotic origin, vehicles that have either landed or crashed.
All right, guys, thank you for being here. It's really good to see you again. I know we got to hang out at Contact in the Desert quite a bit, so I thought what better way to talk about the event than bring us all back together and just, have a chilled conversation. But Luigi, I was a guest, by the way.
You saw the panic in his eyes.
It was just like this big alarm that went off. Sorry about that.
No problem at all. Well, Luigi and Chris, you've been on the show previously. Michael, you're new to the show. Really, really glad to have you on. But for anyone that may not have seen any of my previous stuff, if you could all introduce yourself and just a little bit about yourselves, that'd be great. We'll start with you, Luigi.
Well, this is great to see you guys again after Contact. And basically, I'm Luigi. I'm the director, producer of Project Gravitor. We're making a documentary film on Bob Lazar and his story at S4, and we will follow that with a kick-ass virtual reality experience that's going to follow the film later on, and then we're going to come up with a book on S4, so we basically have a lot of stuff coming regarding the Lazar story.
Thank you. Chris?
My name is Chris Ramsay. People know me from, I guess, either the Magic of the Puzzles or Area 52. I make content.
Awesome, thank you. And Michael, welcome to the show. Please tell us about yourself.
Thanks for having me, man. Michael Phillip, Third Eye Drops is my creative outlet. Lots of long-form interviews, lots of topical wonder dips on everything from consciousness to the phenomena, and probably many other things, but I'll leave it at that because elevator pitches are not what I enjoy most.
No, that's absolutely fine. And I'll be sure to leave all of you guys' links in the description anyway. So people watching and listening, please go and check those out. But, like I said, we met at Contact in the Desert, hung out. I just want to say, what's everyone's experience with attending UFO conferences been like prior to this year's Contact?
I'm gonna stay out of that one. This is my first one ever. So you
Same,
too,
actually. Yeah.
Luigi.
I guess I'm the guy who's been doing this for like over 20 years. So this was the coolest one I've been to. I mean, I've been to so many, I can't remember how many it was. And back in the day, it was like Open Minds would do UFO Congress. There was the MUFON symposiums, which still happen today. And they kind of they always ended up becoming the same thing. This was a little bit different. And one of the things that I found to be really cool, and I know it's going to age me by saying this, but it's like getting to meet guys like you and hanging out with people like you guys at a UFO conference was fucking surreal for me because it was never something I experienced before. And I felt like I was learning I was getting new information from bright, super smart, younger people who are coming in. And again, I'm making myself sound old here, but it really did feel like that. And it felt like it's the new era. It's like a new era that's coming in. So I was very pleased to see that. And I was also pleased to see all the older folks that I used to go to these things with, like Linda Moulton Howe, and I guess I should say Richard Dolan, even though he's not that old, but Whitley, all these people that have been to these conferences for years, but now here they are mixing it up with this younger crowd. And I think it was amazing.
Yeah, I agree. I've been to quite a few conferences now in the past few years because here in the UK, we don't have that many. The ones we have had there's been a large one. I've been to a small one. I've been to one in Europe, and now Contact. And obviously, Contact does stand head and shoulders above the rest. But Chris and Michael, did you have any expectations then, as it's your first time? Is there anything that you hoped it would be, or anything you imagined?
The silence implies that I will go.
Yeah, I was hoping you would.
Yeah, no. So I tried to go just really open-minded, but what I was really just pleasantly surprised about is there's a lot of very bright, deep minds there. You know, I think a lot of people who haven't been to a UFO conference, they may assume that, like, they might make assumptions, right, about like attendees or speakers or topics, but man, like, some truly brilliant people, some truly like multidisciplinary takes on the phenomena, my favorite kind of stuff, you know, like a lot of conversations about consciousness, about like I watched Pascal Michael and neuroscientists talking about everything from like the extraterrestrial hypothesis, aka the UFOs are future humans, and here's a neurological model for how that might actually happen, to like hardcore sci researchers that have been doing like the nitty gritty work of statistically studying consciousness for decades. And everything from that to like direct experiencers, and of course big heads in the space like Dolan, like several others. So it was a really, I thought, just dope a variety of thinkers and people. And the thing that really stands out to me that I appreciate most, and I just kind of echoing what Luigi said, is just that central point where we'd all hang out near the bar and you could just sit down and you knew people were going to show up and you're about to have fabulous conversations and meet cool people. And like, that's my favorite thing. Like, yeah, I've rambled enough.
Yeah, it's, I mean, I feel the same way. I'm just going to echo what these guys said, but honestly, to me, it felt a little familiar. Being a magician, I've gone to many magic conventions in the last 10 years. I used to go to probably 4 or 5 of them a year, and I'd fill content there for the magic community. And so it oddly felt familiar in that it's a niche as well. And it's a niche that's, sort of like within a niche. It's not necessarily like outcasted from society, but this is, a big portion of the people there are introverted, and it's sort of like has that same vibe as a magic convention. So I did feel quite at home, coupled with the fact that everybody was so friendly and accepting and open and inviting. It was just a really, really good energy all around. Like Michael said, hanging around the lobby or outside and just chatting with people you didn't think you'd be interacting with, I think was just a lovely surprise. I as well learned quite a bit on DMT and consciousness stuff that I had no idea I was even interested in to that extent, but it was just so interesting to find. These conversations I found was interesting because not only were you finding a group of people that you could absolutely share anything with, but because of that dynamic, you were willing to share more. And
That's
so the
right.
conversations sometimes would almost end up as, how weird a story can I conjure up? Like you think back on your past and you're like, oh wait, I did have this one time that was like this one thing. Things you wouldn't normally publicly state and that you wouldn't necessarily even privately state. But the fact that everyone was so open, it was like people were digging for like the weirdest stories that they could. And it was such a cool environment to hang out in.
That's a good point.
Yeah,
man.
completely agree.
True.
No, yeah, really, really good point. And I think, often online I see people vilifying UFO conferences, and I bet these are the same people, though, that have never attended one and actually seen how everyone is kind of on the same page or coming together and friendly, like you say. I mean, the venue itself, I think that really helped
Yeah.
with the overall layout of and the way that it was organized. Any opinions or thoughts from anyone on that?
Well, I think the venue does make a huge difference. I think not only was the venue amazing out there, but also the type of people that are in proximity, like the LA crowd, people that are in proximity in California that were there, is a different vibe. It's cooler. For some reason, I felt people were a lot more open to this topic. I mean, I get why some people are a little bit rough on some UFO conferences when they're talking about it, because not referring to like something like we just experienced, they're referring to past experiences, where I think the validity of that point comes from the fact that for too many years it kind of became like this cookie cutter same thing repeated over and over, and it kind of got boring and information got lost in terms of interest, right? So this was like a whole new level. And repeating what Chris said, is like you feel the vibe of everybody opening up and talking about crazy stuff, but real, as important as and real, and willing to discuss it and openly talk about it with people that they just met. That was really cool. That was something I'd not seen as much before.
Yeah. Yeah. One thing I would say about the location, other than it's just for anybody that doesn't know, it's this beautiful location in the Palm Springs area. So it's desert, but it's also mountainous. The resort itself is absolutely beautiful, really amazing,
Really
indoor and outdoor spaces, really large. So imagine, very large ballrooms, probably like, what would you guys say? The largest ones can probably hold like maybe 500 people.
Yeah, I would say at
I'd
least.
say,
Yeah.
at least, yeah, maybe closer to 1,000, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and then all the way down to like these workshop rooms that could maybe fit 1 to 200 or something like that. But so that's one part of it. But another thing I really appreciate. So one of the other conferences I've been to recently is Psychedelic Science, which has gotten absolutely massive. And you definitely lose some like intimacy once the conference gets above a certain size. And I think this is like
Right.
the perfect size, because everybody for the most part is staying in and congregating in one central area. And then that gives this really sort of like fraternal, familial vibe where everybody is going to go to the same bar and you're going to be in the same space with people and you're going to have opportunities to come up to people. Psychedelic Science, people are staying in like a dozen different hotels, and there's this massive, multi-football field, like stadium-sized convention center where it's literally like there's so many talks going on at once. There's a whole floor of like vendors that's just like, many football fields. So I love it and I enjoy it. And I'm actually going again in like a week to that same conference. But I really like the size of Contact in the Desert. It's like, I think that's my favorite sort of mix of crowd, venue, and vibes of anything like this I've been to.
Yeah.
Awesome.
I'm going to say the same. I thought it was perfect. Good size. And it allows for, medium-sized meetups to like, you're never actually overwhelmed.
Yeah.
It was nice having people had time to speak and talk to one another, and they had room to talk to one another. You're not yelling over anyone. You're kind of seeing familiar faces constantly. It was just a really friendly sort of communal vibe for those like 5 days.
Yeah, for sure. I think the added bonus obviously was the pool area, because I know Luigi and Chris and myself, we utilized that on the Saturday for considerable amount of time in the evening, which was incredible just to have that there as well. So yeah, I think all of you touched upon some really good points. But now, Michael, you come from more of the kind of, allow me to say, consciousness side of the subject. And in my experience with UFO conferences, consciousness has only been a very small part of it. Did you think it was well represented at Contact this year?
To some degree, yes. And I mean, that's such a nebulous term, right? Consciousness, because that can imply anything from like, hardcore philosophers who are like in the academic world to people who are experiencing things from more of a consciousness side. And then there's this whole added, addition. It's not really a new addition to the lore, but I would say it's been revved back up with the Barber revelations and psionic assets. So all of that stuff is sort of under, I guess, the heading of consciousness for a lot of people too. And then, all the psi stuff has been around for a long time, like, the remote viewing stuff, Project Stargate. And then that is like, I would say like a close cousin of the UFO phenomenon. But yeah, so I do think in many ways it was well represented. I think because there really even were some pretty academically decorated people there. There are multiple people there with PhDs who are speaking, who I think are at least warm to that side of things. But yeah, I would love to see more, and I think we will see more blending as this, especially as this topic of psi and psionic assets and what its relationship is to the UFO phenomenon becomes more clear, which hopefully it will. I feel like that relationship is going to continue to get closer and closer. I'm going to do everything I can do in my little, corner of the wonder dipping YouTubosphere to keep that relationship warming up more, because that's the most fascinating angle to this phenomenon to me, because it gives you a direct access to things, right? It's like, if without consciousness, it's either you saw something in the sky or you didn't, you had an experience or you didn't. But if there is some kind of intelligence that you can link with via your own consciousness, that's something you can explore anytime. And to me, that's extraordinarily compelling and like wonder-inducing.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of been... Sorry, were you going to say something there, Chris?
No, I was just going to say that was a great point. The fact that you can interact with, it does make it more approachable, more tangible, more like you can reach out and grab it now, so to speak. But I think that's just such a great point that I never really gave any thought. But that's a really, really interesting point, Michael.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, myself, I've come from such a nuts and bolts research background that the consciousness side of the conversation has been growing on me over the last few years the more I interact with both people online and just interviews that I conduct as well. And then that has kind of led me to people like Keel and his theories, like the super spectrum theory, for example, where everything kind of that we see, where the paranormal UFO phenomenon may all fall under one kind of umbrella, let's say, of what's happening. And I love now that I'm actually being able to mesh a lot of these kind of things together for the first time, which has really opened up my everything to look at the phenomena in a new light, let's say. So yeah, I'm glad that you think it was represented well. Dr. Diane Hennessy-Powell was there from the Telepathy tapes sort of fame, let's say. And Chris, you kind of actually were part of a panel there. Could you tell us about the panel and what the kind of concept for it was?
Yeah, Michael was actually there with me as well.
Oh, cool.
We both got to sort of experience, the demonstration, which I thought was really interesting. Now, as someone with a magic background, I was put in a bit of a tricky situation because, they're asking me as a magician, what do you think? And I have to be honest that in a setting like that, those weren't scientifically rigorous conditions. And I think anyone can agree with me on that. I don't think that's going out on a limb or being too skeptical. I think that just is what it is. For me, the conditions that were set by the people doing the experiment themselves, to me, seemed more akin to like some type of parlor trick, right? That's what it looked like as a magician, because you're controlling the parameters as the performer. You're the one deciding what the parameters are, and so that's what a magician does. Right. But in science, it's like if you took a magician and then had the scientists control the parameters. That's where science starts. And so although I was impressed and I thought, it was very brave of them to do something like that on stage and in front of everybody and be very vulnerable, I do think that takes a lot of guts, a lot of courage, and I commend them for that. I would love to see more rigor when it comes to controlling the variables. And I was assured, actually, I emailed Diane afterwards and, just kind of shared my thoughts with her. And she concurred. She was like, yes, subsequently to that demonstration, they went back. They had an Airbnb. They performed more tests. She said there was people from Stanford there who were, making sure the parameters were respected, making sure that the mother wasn't always involved in the testing, which I think is very important as well. So yeah, I'm happy to hear that from Diane, but as you know, I'd love to see it. And if that's something that I'm not necessarily sure that was being done for the documentary that Kai is working on with the telepathy tapes, or if that was just a separate endeavor for Diane's research, but I'd love to see either or in a controlled setting, whether it's, something we get for the masses via this documentary that, Kai says is 70% done at this point. Very excited about that. Or whether it's actual white paper sort of research that's going to be put out via possibly these people at Stanford. I think that would be super interesting. And I'm sure Michael would do a fine job of doing a document read through, or maybe even just like reacting to some of the tests that they had there. But yeah, compelling as I thought it was on stage. And I think it's good that we get it out there. I'm not going to fool myself in thinking that was the, defining factor that changed my whole ontology on this subject. I do feel high conviction that this is real. I just don't believe that with the conditions that were given, that psi ability was properly demonstrated on that day. I'll put it that way.
Yeah, I appreciate you being open about that. So, Michael, could you tell us a bit more about what tests they actually did on stage in front of everyone, and then what your thoughts were after it?
Yeah, to some degree. And I'll definitely defer to Chris because he is like a true expert in how things could be done, how things, could be, whatever. I don't, that's not my world, so I don't know. But yeah, so essentially what you had was a demonstration of like non-ocular sight. So, for at least in part. So in the beginning, she was identifying colors that were behind her head as she was blindfolded, which to me is one of the more impressive things. I'll say that. And then there's other things where she had the blindfold on and people were holding things up and she was able to identify those things through the blindfold. And then there was a section where she was doing things where the daughter would identify the things that she had not seen, right? And only the mother had seen. Is that right, Chris?
Correct.
Yeah. Yep. Okay. So that was essentially it. And I definitely want to echo Chris's point that I think there's just an overwhelming glut of evidence for psi phenomena being real, even from a scientific perspective. You have like the Princeton Engineering Anomalous Research Lab that was I'm not sure if it's still if they're still operating or not, but that went on for years. They did a bunch of amazing research. Ions has done a bunch of amazing, why do you say amazing? Because it's magical, amazing research.
I'll do the amazing here.
Yeah, like all the, just all the stuff out of SRI and Project Stargate. And then also my own personal just weird experiences and experiences people listening have had. Like, to me, the science is interesting, and I'm very glad there are people doing the science, but the subjective element of all the weird shit that's happened to me in my life and stuff that's happened to other people in their life, I don't need some like Ivy League institute to tell me that shit is real. Like, I don't need someone to tell me that my out of body experience was real or not real. Like, but that said, I'm very glad that research is being done, and I do hope for more evidence. But anyway, I guess that summarizes my thoughts, and I colored way outside of the lines of your question.
No. This is great. This is exactly what I like. I like when the conversations are just organic like that, and I appreciate your response there. Now, for everyone watching, the Contact in the Desert do offer a package where you can go and watch all of this stuff after the fact. So I'll make sure that I link that in the description as well, because even I, like that panel we just discussed, I missed that when I was probably in the bar with Luigi. No, I'm kidding. But yeah. But Luigi, speaking of you,
I was actually there. I was actually there.
No, I thought that I was just playing. I was just playing. But Luigi, you brought along your VR headset and showcased a very sneak peek of what people are going to expect, let's say, for the upcoming Project Gravit Bob Lazar experience. So can you tell us how you prepared it? Just the whole, like, what you wanted to show without showing too much. And yeah.
Well, what happened was I was talking to some people that were going to be there, and some of the people said, "Are you going to be bringing anything?" And I didn't really have. I mean, I wasn't even. I was just there as a guest. Like, I mean, I was basically tagging along, get to meet people. It was one of the best experiences for me because I didn't have responsibilities at all. So it gave me the opportunity to roam around, meet everybody, talk all the time, which was great. And I still wanted to bring something because there's a whole bunch of people that asked me. So I said, I'll just bring the goggles. That way I get to show people a tiny little snippet of what's to come in terms of visuals. And basically what we did is I sat here in the studio with Chris and I said, set up like 2 or 3 scenes in the hangar where the sport model flying saucer was parked at S4.
Chris Matto, not me, by the way.
Yeah, right. Sorry, Chris Matto, the guy Chris Matto on my team, not Chris Ramsay. Correct.
I was like, I don't remember this part of the story.
So Chris Matto and I were like trying to develop something so that we could show everybody a little piece of it. And that went extremely well. I mean, a lot of people tried it on, and I showed you, Vinny, obviously. Michael, you got to see it, right?
I didn't, man. There were so many times where I was like, "Oh, yeah, I definitely want to do it," but like, "Oh, you go first," and then somehow I just never did it.
I remember at a certain point, I was showing a couple people, and it ended up whenever we were like next to the bar there, where all the tables were, it was impossible to like manage sometimes especially if I had the goggles out. It was like everybody just wanted to go one after the other, and I had to do a setup. And anyway, it was really cool. I was very happy to see people's response to it. It wasn't even interactive. It was just a visual where you could just rotate and look around, look at the ceilings, the floor, and everybody was just amazed. I got some really cool videos. One of them was my favorite, was when Richard Dolan put it up, and he was just freaking out because he finally got to see it. And that was so cool because Richard and I have known each other a long time, talked about this a lot. And it was the first time Richard got to see this in 3D, which I think is a value for anybody, because the chances of any one of us in our lifetime to get the opportunity to be physically in a 3D environment, a real place where this is happening. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of us would win the lottery 100 times before that can happen. And I'm confident when I say that. So I think this is an opportunity to really go far beyond our imagination, because that's the only way you could see it is through your imagination. And this allows you to have a little snippet of reality without being there. So I think everybody's response was really cool and really motivating for me, because I got to hear everybody's comments, which I need to hear so that we make sure that it delivers when it actually comes out.
Yeah, it was really sorry, go on.
Oh, sorry, man. I was just going to make a stupid comment and say, how much do you think it would realistically cost to
go to S4?
to make a sport model?
I looked at it. I
mean a real one. I mean one that works.
One that works. Oh, that's a different story.
Quadrillions.
Yeah. Probably, yeah.
All the money.
I think all of Earth's money and maybe a
couple meteors.
We need the two guys at Lockheed who know how the drive works, and then that's probably like prying that info out of them.
I heard that China is building a particle accelerator that is 10 times the size of CERN. I don't know if you heard about this.
I did.
And
10 times the length? So like 27
it's just
miles or
absolutely
kilometers?
a monstrosity of a particle accelerator.
Yeah, that's how we're all going to die. It just came to me now.
Yeah.
Just letting you guys know.
Scary thought. Yeah.
That's how the black hole sucks everything up.
That's a scary thought.
Or what if that's when the entities come out of?
Yeah. That's an interesting thought, man, because I've always thought this. It's like, we always try to interface through this, firewall that exists psychically and try to get into the other side. But what if that firewall that is preventing us from telepathically communicating with everything, what if it's actually preventing all that shit from coming in?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's like our protective bubble. I often just like, it gives me pause a little bit when we're really delving into this stuff. I start thinking Jack Parsons and all this other stuff. And I go, do we really want to be opening portals? I don't know.
I agree.
Yeah.
I very much agree. But I think if we had to build it, Michael, I know how to build it. I figured out how to build the thing with human materials just for fun. And that would probably cost upwards of about $200,000 to $300,000. if we have to build a craft that's actually going to be
for like an Airbnb style,
like an Airbnb style,
yeah,
where
I'd
that would be fucking
go
awesome.
there.
I'd go there, you know,
and just in the middle of the desert.
Wait,
yeah,
but then you'd have to crouch down the whole time because the ceiling's so low, though, right?
yeah. But we would have like a kick-ass like screen on the ceiling, you know, where you could watch TV on the ceiling of it, whatever.
Yeah.
But
little Pine Sol drinks.
yeah. Yeah, what's that liqueur that's kind of like that? I think there is one. Can't think
there
of it,
is?
Well, not exactly, but there's like a, very floral kind of piney.
Yeah, we just call it the S4 drink, you know, but I think that if ever we had to have actual element 115, it would take probably a couple thousand years for us to synthesize it. Imagine. So
that's a good point.
What do you mean to get like a stable version of it?
Yeah.
A
Well, to get a stable version in the quantity needed. There's two things. Getting a stable version and then getting a quantity of it is a different story. Yeah. So it would take a long time.
So what you're saying is we need to seal it.
Yeah.
That's all we're left with. Or find it at the bottom of the ocean.
Yeah.
Yeah, on the same line, just sticking with that, you spent a lot of time with Bob. Have you learned anything more about Element 115 that isn't in the public domain?
Not more. Actually, I would say, I don't know if it's all in public domain. I think a lot of it is just technical stuff, more so what it looked like in terms of hyper detail. Not more than, actually, I'm wrong. There's two things I did learn about it that is not public, and it's going to be in our film, because we managed to, Bob out of nowhere, typical Bob, by the way, says to me, hey, by the way, I have a tape somewhere in my garage. It's a U-matic tape that I filmed just after I came public, and it's never been played. We filmed it with a friend of mine and never, ever played the tape ever and made it public. Wow. And he goes, you're more than welcome to have it if my friend, and it's his friend John Farhat that had filmed it with him. He says, if John gives you permission to put it in your film, you're free to put this out. And so all that happened. We spoke to John. John gave us his blessing, and I absolutely will credit him for that. And we got the tape, we digitized it, and there's a portion of the tape that Bob goes in hyper detail about Element 115. Things that he had never said before were on that tape. So yes, actually, the answer is yeah. There's going to be some really cool technical stuff that is going to come out about 115, and it talks about the melting point, the carrier wave of Element 115, obviously the weight, 223 grams, that was known, a whole bunch of information on it. So yeah,
if anybody wants to see what that footage looks like, there's some of it in the trailer.
Yeah, that's right. Some of it is in the trailer where Bob's in this. There's like a blue background, and you see Bob Lazar. That's not us deep faking Bob Lazar. That's actually real, never before seen footage of Bob Lazar back then.
Cool.
Amazing, man. Everyone, again, watching, link in the descriptions to Project Gravator YouTube channel. Go and check out the trailer and subscribe, and I'm sure Luigi and the team will be putting out updates leading up to the release. But just going back to the VR experience that you brought along to Contact, it's such a shame, Michael, that you didn't get to see it. So, Chris, I just wondered what your reaction was to it when you first stepped in there.
Yeah, my reaction, I think I've actually filmed my reaction and put it on a video. It was, I mean, it's hard to say with words, but the feeling you get is quite ominous. And I think a lot of people kind of feel that. You feel like you're not supposed to be there. Like you're looking at something from a perspective that you're not supposed to be. Like any second, somebody could just, shove a barrel in your side and be like, what are you doing here? Like, that's kind of the feeling you get. And then there's this dichotomy between this beautiful perfection of a craft, this absolute galactic Ferrari, sitting in sort of this archaic, primitive hangar. We got an extension cord running from the inside of the craft all the way outside, plugged into the wall, right? And if you follow the extension cord, it leads into this tripod light that's lighting. And so it's this crazy this crazy balance of this otherworldly technology that we're not worthy of having, you know, in what is our best version of a bunker, which still seems, you know, really archaic. It doesn't seem advanced at all compared to what it is. And so that is, I think, thoroughly represented. But then alongside that, you've got the hangar doors, you know, that at one point you can see all the other craft that are in the 8 other hangars. And then you got the hangar door that leads to the outside. And, you know, Luigi has versions that he shares where that's just open, you know, whether daytime or nighttime. And there's just something, you know, it stops being in this weird hangar that exists solely in like the pocket of, you know, this digital interface. And then all of a sudden the door opens. You're like, oh, that's Las Vegas. That's Nevada. That's the desert. You know, I've been to that desert. You know what I mean? Like there's something really tangible about that. It's like you can just like, oh man, if I just draw a straight line from here, I'm on a highway somewhere. And there's a really crazy realization there. You know, when Luigi had this get together, celebrating the documentary and everything else, he invited a few people, and there's some pictures on social media, and Bob was present, and I got to see Bob briefly there, and you know, I got to talk to him about that, and he as well concurred the exact same feeling, and his words were, "It's so crazy that you felt that, like that ominous feeling," because he's like, "That's exactly what it was like working there." And so it's just a testament to how accurate that vision is that Chris and Luigi and the team made, that you get to feel at least a percentage of that sort of dreadful fear that Bob felt, this mix of excitement and terror that you feel when you're in the presence of this thing. Yeah, really profound.
I have a question.
For sure.
Is it known in the lore where the sport model supposedly came from?
In the lore? Yeah.
I mean, like, is there a story
Isn't
for
it
like
Zeta Reticuli?
Oh, yeah.
Well,
I mean,
but I mean, like,
where
how
it was found?
Yeah, like how? Yeah.
Oh,
no.
Maybe, but they're maybe in the ocean. They're saying maybe an archaeological dig.
Yeah.
That's because I don't want to take the words out of your mouth here, Luigi, but it was like the Office of Naval Intelligence that handled this. So you have to assume that this was this was something that they found in the ocean along with the other crafts as well. So
That's right.
That's, I think, and then Bob had mentioned something about hearing about some type of archaeological dig, that this could be like 10,000 years old or something like that. So, you know.
Yeah. That's exactly right. And that's the big mystery, because it clear, you know, there was information he got where he heard it was found in this archaeological dig in the water, and that's the reason why the United States Navy was in charge. And, you know, he was paid by the Department of Naval Intelligence, which now we hear as which is what we know as the Office of Naval Intelligence. Is that really the same thing? Then he saw U.S. Navy logos on some documents that were top secret, which is interesting. Never any Air Force insignias anywhere where you would think it would be the Air Force, because it's in the air. So something has to do with the water. And the information that was brought to him, or this could be archaeological and it could be very ancient. What he found to be interesting was, if that was the case, then the craft didn't look like it had aged at all. He says it had no oxidation, it had no wear and tear that would give the impression of something to be that ancient. He says it looked new, it looked like it was just recently fabricated. So he says either the materials don't decay or don't have the same, let's say they have a longer life, or the information that he got was incorrect. Whatever the case, this thing looked fairly new to him. He said it looked like it had just came out of the production line, which is really interesting.
Wow.
Yeah, and that's one thing that stood out to me when I put the headset on, and I was like, wow. And everyone recognizes the sport model, but I did feel like I was seeing it in a whole new light. I think I mentioned on a clip I filmed as well, while you filmed of me, Luigi, with my camera, that now that you can actually kind of see a bit of depth and dimension to it, it feels like it's brought it in a whole new lease of life to me personally. And just again, following on from something Chris said about that being inside like the hangar door, I think there were 3 clips or areas that you showed in the headset, and there was that one that really stood out to me was seeing the big diagonal of that door that opens up, which I assume would open up into the desert, and that's when you get the scale of that door and the actual hangar itself. It was incredible.
Much as I can, but yeah, man, I definitely have dealt with burnout, do deal with disappointment. But I don't know, man. Like I always try to find a way to keep going. And yeah, like this week for me is actually really crammed because I was just on that trip. I'm leaving on another trip, so that I'm trying to think forward in content, multiple weeks. So it's just, and then there's like, I had to take my cat to the vet and like all this other stuff like this, which I want to do, but then it all just kind of like crams together and it just kind of creates more stress around everything. But I have nothing to complain about. I'm doing what I love for a living. And, past versions of myself would have killed to be in the position that I'm in now. So I always try to keep that perspective. And I don't really have an answer for what to do about burnout, but I think at this point, this is where I want to hear what Chris has to say, because it seems like he at least on the outside, always has this like incredibly rosy disposition. And I know he's been doing creative stuff like probably even longer than I've been doing it. I was doing a podcast before I was doing YouTube. So I've been doing like almost weekly podcasts for like a decade at this point.
Wow.
But yeah, Chris, what about you, man?
Yeah. I mean, I've dealt with my fair share of burnout, a few times where it's really like hit me where I hit a wall and I was like, I can't even get out of bed. Like it was like crippling at one point. So it definitely is real, and I've made videos about this in the past on my other channels when it has happened to me, and just trying to like open up to the audience and share with them like a little bit of what's going on in my life. I think destigmatizing it is really important. And I'll say what Michael said, like I'm in a position, I understand the position I'm in. I'm very, very, I've created a privileged lifestyle for myself through hard work where I can now do what I love doing. But that doesn't mean that it comes without its own set of problems, right? So although the problems might pale in comparison to problems that I had in the past, they're very different problems and they do still affect me and they're very real problems, right? So those are things that you definitely still have to play with. I find things that really help me are sort of like just a checklist of like these mantras that I do every day and like what I'm thankful for. And it's really like little things, catching yourself. And whether that's meditating daily definitely helps, taking some time to read, just doing other things that don't involve work. And I think this goes for anybody working in front of a computer. I think just doing anything else and turning the notifications off for a minute or a few hours and just enjoying life, going for a walk, that type of thing. I think those things help immensely. But at the end of the day, we still got to be creative. Sometimes, even if you don't feel like it, you still got to pump things out. Even if this video is not going to do well or whatever, you still got to get it out there. And then you got to forget about it and move to the next one. And that's really the struggle, is where, you pour all of this energy into this beautiful piece of molded art. And you're like, this is perfect. It's everything I've ever wanted. And then the second you drop it, you got to be like, oh shit, got to work on the next one. And you got to completely forget about it. So working on like a movie or something, you have that time to work on it and then kind of like bask in your glory and do all these wonderful things and these events to promote it. And as content creators, we don't have that luxury. We don't get 3 days a week where we can be like, so happy. I came home on like, what was it, like a Tuesday or Wednesday. By Friday, I had that video up of the conference, and it was a hell of an edit. Those were like 10 p.m. nights where I was editing all day. Shot over the weekend, started editing on Monday, still editing now, and I'll be editing till like 10 tonight for the video tomorrow, right? So to give you an idea of the schedule, it's just nonstop. So yeah, definitely a challenge, but like Mike said, honestly, I'm willing to take it, and I think as long as you can remain creatively selfish, I think you'll be happy. And I think that's really, really important. Not to quote Rick Rubin and sort of the audience comes last, but a little bit of that I think is real. I think make yourself happy above all when it comes to creating, because the second you start creating for others And sometimes we have to do that. We have to just get something, whatever it is. But the second you start making that the priority and the habit, that's the second the burnout's going to come full force. So stay creatively inspired, whether that's jamming with friends like this on a call like this that gets me amped up, whether that's reading a book, watching a movie, watching one of your videos, something like that, just to keep that inspiration going and keep that flame burning. Because the second you start feeding the machine is the second that machine's going to eat you up.
Luigi, what about you? Do you feel it as,
I have to say, before I say how I keep myself going, but seeing all you guys, meeting with all you guys and sitting there and having I felt like I was in an editing anonymous meeting where we could all, basically be like, oh my God, everybody has editing burnout sometimes, and so that's something that actually felt really good. It made me feel like, okay, I'm not nuts, this is a shit ton of work. And I can't even imagine, look, I'm completely different than all you guys, because you guys are creating new content all the time. It's different, new subjects, new ways of presenting them. I've been just editing a film. Now, it's a big task, mind you, it's a gigantic task, but it's still editing regardless. So that was really interesting for me to hang out with you guys, and you guys making it sound like it's okay to go a little bit nuts when you're editing all the time. So that felt good. So that was great. As far as the way I keep myself balanced, I've been in this field or been part of the research of UFOs and all this for a long, long time. And what happened to me is I did burn out many times in it. And I would say it was either physical burnout or just emotional burnout, because there's different categories of burnout. And a lot of times if it's physical, it's because you're doing too much, or physical and mental for me was a little bit same. But then you have emotional burnout, where these things this information that we're getting is sometimes earth-shattering information that breaks our concept of reality. And so it all depends on how ready we are to accept these things, and how does that make us able to function fast or efficiently after we get all this information. And I think what happened with me was I kind of started looking at it in a different way, and I started saying, how can I contribute what I enjoy doing into this? What can I bring to the table that I'm not just doing the same as other people, but what can I bring that's a little different, but I find absolutely valuable to me as a person, so that I enjoy doing it all the time. And that was a big shift for me. So as long as we're happy in what we're doing, it because it's for us and we're happy doing it, and it brings a little flavor that most people haven't, tasted in this field, in this realm, that's great. It'll keep us, going. So yeah.
By the way, I'll just say, you look at a guy like, let's say Mr. Beast, right? We're all in this YouTube sphere or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Look at a guy like Mr. Beast, right? He's getting 100 million views. If he gets 50 million views, that's a shit video. You understand? So he gets 50 million views and he shits on himself and his team probably. They're probably like, what did we do wrong to get 50 million views only, right? So it's a perspective thing too. Although, sometimes we sit there as content creators and go, why did this video underperform? And YouTube shows us the 10 out of 10. And we go, what's wrong with me? What don't I understand? Why does my audience hate me? Why does the world hate me? Why am I being ghosted by the algorithm? Why am I being blacklisted by YouTube? And all these thoughts run through your mind. Just consider that, whatever the lowest performing video you've had in the last 6 months would be someone's absolute dream to have, just getting into this stuff. And so, and you could probably fill up a stadium with some of those numbers. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It's pretty crazy. If you were to have 1,000 views on a video, well, 1,000 people at that conference would have filled up that ballroom pretty nicely. And that would have felt pretty darn good to sell out. Right. So, I think perspective goes a long way too. Sometimes we just got to zoom out and be like, I'm doing good. This is working. Everything's fine. I'm happy, healthy, and I'm being creative, and that's more than enough.
I think I appreciate all three of you for being very open and honest with your answers, and I can relate to a lot of what all of you said. And I think leading up to Contact in the Desert, I was feeling that burnout quite heavily, and I think a lot of it was a mixture of constantly trying to create things, but also just in the UFO subject, we get peaks and troughs, and I felt like it was a bit of a down period. So I guess my point is that getting to Contact and hanging out with you guys and experiencing those amazing 4 days sort of relit a little fuse inside me. So I came back feeling slightly refreshed. And so I think that's kind of one of the major takeaways for me. So yeah, I hope there's a message in there for people watching as well. But before we finish on this panel discussion, does anyone have any funny stories from Contact, synchronicities from Contact, anything big or small? And I mean, I'll start with... Captain Ron came running over to the table when I was sat there. He's like, "We've all got to go outside now. There's something happening on the lawn." Like it was something, I don't know. And Luigi, you were there. And,
yeah.
So we walked down and out comes Richard Dolan and Tracy in this UFO. So yeah, that was like, okay, that was just one of those moments I guess I'll never forget. But anyone else, anything?
I kind of do, but it would take some backstory. But I'll just say that I was really intrigued by this guy Adam Curry, who's there. He is one of the psi researchers that I mentioned, and he's just this very like unique, brilliant dude. And when I was looking down the list of all the speakers, I knew I wanted to talk to him. And I was emailing back and forth with him, and he was very like responsive and was like, "Yeah, let's meet up. I'm gonna be absolutely slammed, and I'm only there from I think he left Sunday or something." And he's like, "So I don't know if I'll have time to do a pod, but let's definitely talk, and like we can film something short if you want, or we can circle back later." So we just had these like hilariously like star-crossed like passing meetings that happened like 4 or 5 different times where I was like, Paul Smith told me a story about him, and then I ran into him as I was like trying to worm my way into the awards dinner that I wasn't even supposed to be at. And then I got in right as he started telling me this crazy story. And then it happened to me again after I went to his talk where like he was going one way and then someone else started talking to me and I was like, "I'll talk to you later." And then I was up in the Bledsoe's room and I was like, I got to go to bed. I'm so tired. And the second I decided I was going to leave, Adam Curry came in and I was like, "Oh shit, I'm going to stay a little longer." And then they're like, "No, we're going to close it down, guys. Like everybody, it's time to go to bed." So there was just like 4 or 5 different times where I wanted to talk to him but didn't get to talk to him. But we are going to do a pod in a couple of days, so it's gonna happen. And I have kind of big expectations for that one because I've already like learned some interesting things about him that I'm dying to know more about.
That's awesome.
Awesome.
I had I got to perform a lot of magic, and that's something I really enjoy doing in social settings, especially to break the ice. I think with a lot of people that I don't know, for me, it's maybe this crutch that I have socially, but that I get to lean on, sometimes when my personality can't carry me through a conversation, maybe I'll whip out a deck of cards. But I did in fact enjoy it, especially we were sitting at a table outside. At one point, there was this young lady with her father. I don't know if he dragged her along because like it was, he wanted to be there. And I didn't know what the situation was. But then there was like all sorts of other people sitting around the table, and I think Dan Cleary was there, and like some other. I don't really remember who else was there, but there was a bunch of people. I was like, hey, what a great opportunity to just do like some type of like communal trick. So I did a bunch of tricks for this young lady, and she had a blast. That made me so happy. Her father was super thankful because he's like dragging this kid around at this, and we're all talking about like, oh, the hybrid agenda, and like she's just sitting there like don't know what to do. So that was a highlight for me, was getting to show someone magic who really lit up and appreciated it, and then being able to just sort of bring everybody in through magic and create this sort of like wonderful little experience that we could all live in together, this little fictional bubble. And magic is just like a great universal language in that way, that it really binds people together. It takes them out for a spin, so to speak. And, we all know it's just trickery, performance and whatnot. And yet we're still kind of wisped away in this little, fictional bubble. And whether that's people you agree with online or people you disagree with. And that's I think, somebody might have been like Patrick who said this from Vetted. But like, you go on to Twitter or any of these other platforms and you're going to come across a lot of grumpy troll behavior from people, right? And a lot of those people, like online, the people who comment and all this stuff, it's no surprise, but there's something deeper is happening, right? We know that. It's not actually, what it portrays to be, but it's usually something deeper. But when you see people in person, the semantics are stripped away. You're genuinely connecting. You're looking into people's eyes and you're feeling their energy out. And so, yeah, whether you agree with them or not online in this space, all of a sudden you're having a great time. You're laughing with people, and I'm going to use this example. There was Ashton Forbes. All right. And I'm not going to sit here and say, oh, I believe him. I don't believe him. Like, whatever. I don't really care about the conversation, but in person showed him some magic and he lit up like a child. And that for me, I think goes to show you the difference between this online community that happens and everybody gets in everybody's face and in their business and they get caught up with the drama.
True.
But in person, everybody can be civil, have a good time, and have an actual meaningful conversation about the topic without being at each other's throats. For the most part, I think.
Yeah.
Well said.
Totally agree with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Luigi, anything stands out for you?
Well, nothing that was like out of the ordinary. One of the things that I found to be extremely funny, and Chris is going to agree here, is Linda Moulton Howe scared the shit out of Chris.
Oh yeah, we should have talked about that. Yeah.
I was there. Yeah, that was brilliant.
That was just so good.
I left my body. It was. I got so scared.
Yeah, that was cool. That was kind of like a little karate chop kind of.
Yeah,
thing.
she was telling me this whole story. I'm not going to get into the whole story she was telling, but at one point she's like, and then he was like, I could kill someone. And I was like, what do you mean? And he goes, bah! And she does this. I'm like, oh. And I started the conversation with Linda. I probably was about 5 feet away.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like 10 minutes in, if you've ever spoken to her, she pulls you in, right? She's like this, and she's like, come here, let me get closer to you. And she's talking to you, and I'm just hanging on every word. And I'm like, I'm in critical hit distance, right? You can critical strike me.
Mm-hmm.
And she just did one of the, I swear I jumped back so fast and so far. But it was so wonderful. It felt like a moment, like a rite of passage almost for me. And it was really wonderful.
It's funny to think about. At what point did she decide to do that in the story? Did she know she was going to tell you this story and be like a low talker? So, and we should also emphasize there's a large height difference between her and Chris.
Oh, for sure.
So Chris has to like kind of get close, and he, yeah. And I don't know. I just really like to think about that. She's like engineered that entire thing like you would engineer a magic trick. Like she's like, oh, this big guy, I'm gonna scare the fucking shit out of this guy.
That's what I was thinking. I was like, did she do this to everybody, or is this the first time she's done this? It felt like she's done this more than once.
Great. Yeah.
Oh, that's really good. Well, that's a good, happy note to end on. Guys, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate each and every one of you.
Thank
you,
man.
Vinny.
Man.
Yeah, this was a lot of fun.
Love you.
And everyone watching, I hope you guys take something away from this, whether you see UFO conferences in a positive light or a negative light. I just can't recommend it enough to actually get that in-person connection with people like we managed to get this time around. So, yeah, have a think about it for next year, because I know I'm going to be there. And also, like I said, check out Contact in the Desert's website for any replays or things that you may want to catch up on after the fact. That they do charge, but I think it is a worthwhile, looking back at some of these amazing speakers and panels and things like that. But thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you on the next one.